American Association of Black Physician Scientists here with our second interview with Dr. Sakima Smith, who is a cardiologist and a researcher here at the Ohio State College of Medicine. And we're gonna have a good conversation and get to know him a little bit better, get to understand how he mixes his life with, being a physician as well as doing really prominent, awesome research, because he's R1 funded and all that good stuff. Doctor, I'm going to start this a little bit different. We kind of sort of, understand the influence that doctors like you guys have on us. And one of the really amazing doctors that we've had here, Dr. Quinn Capers, actually wrote something awesome about you on his Twitter, because he loves Twitter. And
Yes.
He spoke about, how you were the first Black male cardiologist fellow here, and now you are a faculty member running your own lab, and how that journey has been. So we want you to kind of sort of reflect on that, because we didn't see the full picture. He just gave us a little glimpse. So tell us about all of that and what that means to be the first Black cardiologist fellow here at the Ohio State College of Medicine.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. And it's an honor and pleasure to be here today and to shed some insight from my perspective, at least, in terms of being a Black male and cardiologist as well as physician scientist. With respect to your question regarding Dr. Capers and my role being the first Black cardiology fellow, I was actually the second Black fellow overall in the history of our division of cardiology. Honestly, I wasn't even aware of it at the time.
Oh.
Dr. Capers recruited me from WashU, Washington University in St. Louis, for residence. Where I was located for residency, and honestly, Ohio State was. I heard of Ohio State. It was some. I have family in Cincinnati. I'm originally from Missouri, St. Louis, so I figured I had an interview. It was easy enough. I was traveling from Cleveland down to Cincinnati for some other interviews. I figured why not. Met Dr. Capers during my interview, and that really changed the trajectory of my career in terms of, I decided at that point in time that I was going to leave WashU in St. Louis and come here to Ohio State for my cardiology training, and then the rest is history, so to speak. But I had no idea that in that journey that I would actually be the first Black male or just the second Black cardiologist ever. And I don't think it's a reflection on our division in the sense that they weren't trying. It's just that there was no success, and maybe the strategies were not correct or aligned with how to recruit. And really what it came down to was just having mentorship. And I felt that Dr. Capers would be a great mentor. I was looking for that at that stage in my career. I have been to a good quote-unquote academic institution, so I haven't been there, done that. And I wasn't looking for that for my next step for fellowship training. I wanted to make sure that I was able to fulfill my potential and at the same time had the flexibility to pursue the career and pathway that I wanted. And I felt like Ohio State aligned with my interests and gave me all of that. And I felt that Dr. Capers would be the appropriate mentor. It wasn't until maybe halfway through my first year when I found out about the history. And I was kind of shocked because I never, just the culture around the division, I never really felt that. It was very welcoming. So I had no idea that I was actually new on the scene, so to speak. But because of those initial efforts, we went from essentially worst to first. If you look at our ranking in the Association of Black Cardiologists, we were on the Hall of Shame, essentially, for never having a fellow, to the Hall of Fame, to where consistently we would have 1 or 2 or 3 per year. And even still to this date, we still continue that trajectory. And now being an associate program director for a cardiovascular fellowship program, I have a immediate impact on terms of who we recruit and how we recruit. So I think that, while it's unusual history, I wasn't really aware of it, but it wasn't something that held us back, and we just kind of really only grown from there to make it now a strength, in terms of our diversity, diverse within our fellowship program.
I agree. I mean, I think, we have Black Men in Medicine Roundtable, and I see all of you guys now. It's like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And to know that, we went from, like you said, the Hall of Shame to I can, I think it's more than my hands and feet. I can see a lot of awesome Black physicians, and you guys have been great mentors. And speaking of that, I think, Dr. Capers, we've lost him, but not in our hearts. He's still here. He was the reason why I chose to come here too. I think his openness and his straightforwardness as well about the culture of medicine and how accepting it is for, all across the board for, African Americans in general, and how, inclusive he's trying to make that was very important to me. And again, I think a lot of those conversations was some of the reasons why we felt, the American Association of Black Physician Scientists had to be created, because we needed a space, right? And I'm so happy again that you're here with us. So thanks for sharing that. So just to get a little bit more about, your upbringings and your background, tell us, were you a first generation college student or a med student or a grad student?
Well, so I'm the only person in my family who's ever gone through this crazy journey of being a physician. So I was second generation. My parents were actually the first generation, and actually, it's hard to believe, but so on my father's side of the family, he was the first person to ever go to college. I mean, his father never made it past the 8th grade, or mother, so he was the first. And same thing with my mother. They never got past the 8th grade. My mother's parents, my grandparents, so they kind of struck out on their own and kind of created this kind of new wave. And they actually met at Antioch University in Ohio, in Yellow Springs, Ohio. So I was actually born in Cincinnati, Ohio, where my father's from, but when I was 4, we moved back to St. Louis, where my mother's from, and that's where I grew up. So that's really what started my journey. So, my father he was a biology major, but he never really pursued that. Once he had a family, me, so to speak, then his focus was to raise a family and get a job. So I think he's kind of living vicariously through me in terms of my medical journey, so to speak. So, but they really laid the foundation for college and what transpired after that. I mean, I can vividly recall when I was 5 or 6, I didn't know what college was. I just knew that I was supposed to go one day. I didn't know what it meant. But
cool. Thanks for sharing. So tell me a little bit more about your path to medicine.
Sure. Again, it was somewhat unconventional because I really didn't have any mentors. I didn't have anyone to really guide me in that direction, to kind of instruct me in what coursework to take and how to prepare for this or that. And it really just kind of happened spontaneously. I was a sophomore in high school. I thought I was an athlete, at least back in the day. So I was pretty fast when I was younger. So I was a 16 sophomore in high school. One of my football coaches at the time, who actually has some connections to, I think he went to Antioch, so he really looked after me. But he just one day mentioned, hey, I think you could be a doctor one day. I think you'd be a great doctor. And I never really thought about it, to be honest. I mean, I like science and biology and things of that nature, and I thought maybe, I would pursue some kind of scientific career, but never really thought about being a physician. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, Dave thinks I can be a physician. Well, I don't know. So I looked it up, read about it a little bit, went home and told my folks about it, and they said, that sounds great, go for it. So that really is how my journey started. But it was a lot of trial and error, just kind of learning more about it and what coursework I had to take and what majors I had to do in college and things of that nature, just learning on my own and then trying to find different people to mentor me. So it was challenging to figure out, I had to study for MCAT. What's the MCAT? How do I prepare for that? People take a course. I don't have any money, I was going to take a course when, so trying to get side jobs to pay for things, it was just challenging to figure it out. But I persevered no matter what. I always believed in myself. My parents believed in me, and I was committed to the cause. So I never really gave up on that dream. So I mean, after college, actually, I taught for a couple of years before I even went to med school. But I knew in the back of my mind, ultimately, that's what I wanted to do. So after I think I was out of school for 2 years, I decided, I'm ready. I'm going to go all in, focus, do what I need to do, and make sure I make it happen. And I was accepted to Temple University School of Medicine in 2002. Yeah, so that's my Philadelphia connection. And I love my time at Temple in Philadelphia, and that really, I really grew and matured and realized that I made the right decision and just developed a passion for medicine and cardiology, actually, during my time in Philadelphia. So, I mean, that's kind of a long-winded version of how I made it, so to speak, but it wasn't easy. I had setbacks like everyone else. I didn't go straight to med school right out of college. So you learn along the way, you grow, you mature, and I think it makes you stronger. those early setbacks, kind of, I think, prepare you for the future. And it's great for a career and as a physician scientist. So it's not a big, I don't get crushed when I get rejected for a grant. I've been rejected so many times in my life. It's like, okay.
Indeed, I think.
Just bounce back. It's not a big deal.
It's a different kind of build when you kind of sort of, I applied to medical school 3 times, right? And a lot of people say after the second time they wouldn't, but I had great mentors who said, you want to do MD, PhD, Shane, go for it. Like, third time is going to be the try. Like, do your thing. I think, Dr. Mitchell, when she was here, she shared some of that too, that some of the things she went through to get to med school, really helped her on her journey. So I'm glad that's a universal, trend amongst us. Should it be that way? I don't know.
Well, it builds character. Everyone has a different journey. Is
Sure.
how I look at it. And it builds fortitude, it builds character, resilience, all the things that you need sometimes to succeed, especially in science, and even as a physician. So you learn from these experiences. It makes you better, in my mind at least.
Yeah, I 100% agree. 100%. So, just to take another little segue, right? You mentioned you were in St. Louis. Your father was a biologist. You kind of sort of had some inkling, but then it was your a football coach who said, "Hey, you can do this. Like, you can become a doctor one day." And you kind of sort of took that little spark and you went along with it. But you tell me now, you get to Temple and you're in love with cardiology. How did research get into it, right?
That's a really, really great question. That came a lot later. So when I was at Temple and even my early part of my training at residency at WashU, what I realized is that I loved the academic environment. I knew very early that private practice wasn't for me. It's for some people it's great. It just wasn't for me. It's not what I envisioned. I just really fell in love with the academics, the teaching, the learning, the innovation, things of that nature. But I envisioned myself being involved more so from as a clinician educator or doing clinical trials or something more with patients, more so because of my experiences at Temple. And then when I was at WashU, I was really exposed to research, but it was more clinical. My mentor ran a translational echocardiography lab, and he also did some metabolomic work, but it wasn't basic science. It was more clinical and translational. So that's kind of where it all started for me, and I thought, okay, I'll pursue that pathway. But really, as you mentioned earlier and articulated, mentors really play a big role in terms of where you go. So when I arrived here in 2009, again, I knew I wanted to stay in academics. That was my passion, that was my intent. But then I reached this fork in the road where you have to figure out, how do you stay in academics? How do you build an academic career? It can't be by writing a few great review articles and thinking that you're going to do research, right? So I knew I liked research, and I did a few retrospective projects, and then it was cool to get those projects and those papers published. So I kind of got the bug from that. It's like, oh my gosh, my thoughts. I had some thoughts. We answered a problem and had a hypothesis. We tested it, and now we have a paper, and there was my name on it. It's pretty cool. So I kind of like that, to see how something in my mind could actually come to fruition. But what I was doing at the time wasn't going to develop into an actual research career. So I started meeting with some different mentors throughout Ohio State, and then people were like, well, you need funding. If you're going to be a researcher in academics, no one's going to give you time to just write and do different things. You need to have grants and funding to buy down your time to allocate that effort towards that. I was like, okay, great. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll do translational, because it was really hot at the time. Everyone was talking translational. So I figured that's what I would do. So I met with one of my mentors, Dr. Phil Binkley, who's a cardiologist, senior cardiologist, and he said, hey, there's a new translational scientist here from Iowa, Peter Moeller. You should go and meet him. And I was like, okay, sure. Peter Moeller was a basic scientist. And he ran a basic lab. He had translational ideas, but he wasn't a traditional translational researcher. So when I met him, I was like, animal studies, biochemistry, molecular work, Western blots. Are you kidding me? So I didn't think, I was like, why are you introducing me to this guy? But I met him. I listened to what he had to say, and he was able to sell a vision on me in terms of how to solve problems and think of mechanistic questions. So I decided to give it a shot. I spent initially, it was just 1 month. The plan was to spend 1 month in this lab and learn a few techniques and then try to figure out how to translate that. It doesn't work that way. But I realized I actually enjoyed being in that environment and working with these transgenic models and doing some animal surgeries and whatever. So 1 month became 3 months, and then it became, hey, Peter, I need to spend more time in this lab. Let's write some grants to where I can take some time out of fellowship training and actually immerse myself into the basic lab. And that's what happened. I was fortunate enough to receive internal funding so I spent another almost 1.5 years in his lab doing basic science, working with transgenic animal models, doing molecular biology and things of that nature. And I really just made a complete 180 in terms of my career pathway. And that set the stage for me to then be competitive for early career funding, KO8s and Harold Amos grants and things of that nature. So when I started as a faculty member, I was on the tenure track, and was maybe 60% of my effort was allocated towards research. And unfortunately, I was fortunate enough to receive more funding, then eventually to branch off and develop my own program in my own lab. So I didn't see it happening this way. I can't believe that it's now been 7 years that I've been in this. Actually, it's been longer than 7 years now. I've been doing this, but it was not what I envisioned. But I think the key is you have to be open-minded, and when opportunities present themselves, you just have to be prepared. You have to be ready to think outside the box, see an opportunity, and go for it, and then invest in yourself, believe in yourself, and take a chance. I was willing to take time out of my training and commit to do something different. That was hard to do. It's med school and training in cardiology is long enough. And then now you're telling me to take more time out to do more training. But in the end, it was worth it because I was able to get the job and the career that I love and I enjoy. So for me, it was worth that sacrifice. I was used to sacrificing, so it wasn't a big deal for me to sacrifice again. I've been through so much.
You hit on some really great gems there. So that sounds like an amazing journey, right? This wasn't what you expected for yourself, but you're here and you're loving it. And so let's just take a segue a little bit. So you were recently named the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Heart Vascular Center at the Ohio State College of Medicine. In this newly created role, what do you kind of sort of hope to accomplish? And how do you define how do you define being successful in that role?
That's a really great question. And, really this opportunity happened, unexpectedly. But again, you have to be prepared and ready when opportunities present themselves. Then you have to decide, are you ready to take on that challenge? And actually, prior to accepting that role, maybe 4 months earlier than that, prior to that, I was actually named the Vice Chair for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Department of Internal Medicine. And even for that, I wasn't sure if I was even going to put my name into the hat, so I was at the last minute I applied for that position after talking to Dr. Capers and a few other mentors, saying, hey, this opportunity is here for the Department of Internal Medicine. Should I apply? I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Do you think I have the experience, the expertise, the background? Capers kind of laughed and said, you better apply for that. And he was right, of course. I mean, he's always right. So
yeah, right.
So I was fortunate enough, myself and Jen Cephas we're both the vice chairs, and I was fortunate enough to be selected after going through several interviews. And I think that kind of helped set me up to be the candidate for the position in the Heart and Vascular Center to be the Chief Diversity Officer. At least with the Heart and Vascular Center, the goal really in that role is to make sure we have representation on the front line, whether it's the nursing staff, technicians, radiology staff, things of that nature, trying to understand patterns for retention and why people leave and how can we recruit them, how to improve diversity within the infrastructure and leadership structure throughout the Heart and Vascular Center. So we're in the process of really just data gathering. You really can't implement change until you look at data. You have to understand the data and the numbers and the trends first before you can have a really targeted approach. So right now, we're meeting with different people to essentially collate and collect and analyze data to figure out what's the percentage of nurses who are African American or whatever underrepresented group there may be there. How many women are in leadership positions? Just being proactive and getting these data, and then once we understand the trends, then we can come up with strategies of how to attack this, how to make things better. And the nice thing is that in this position, I have the complete support of the hospital leadership. And when you take on these positions, you take them on when you know you have support, because otherwise it's a time sink and you can't get anything done. So both times I decided to take on these additional roles and challenges because I felt that they were putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And the support was there, not just for me, but for the initiatives and the goals. And I think Ohio State, whether it's with the Department of Internal Medicine, or the Heart and Vascular Center, we're not starting at a bad place, but you can always get better, right? So I think that's the key. It's not as if we were abysmal and we got starting from scratch and we're horrific with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion. I think we're actually doing a decent job, but I think there are ways we can get better. You always can get better. And the instant that complacency sets in, then you look up and then whatever gains you've made have gone away with complacency. So we're being proactive. There's a lot of support and energy behind these efforts. So I'm just excited to be involved. And it's a different leadership role for me. I think for me it was a new challenge. I like challenges, so it was a nice way for me to take on something that I hadn't done before, to push myself into a different direction and work with leaders and shareholders and things of that nature.
You have an MD. And you like research, so you did cardiology research and preferred basic science. And then I see there's an MPH there.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I didn't plan on getting an MPH, but when I had this grant, it was through it was an NIH CCTS, so it was a translational-based grant, Center for Clinical and Translational Sciences here at Ohio State CCTS. And one of the stipulations for that grant was that you had to be enrolled in a master's level coursework. So I had the option of a master's in science or MPH. I chose MPH because I could focus on clinical and translational investigation. It was kind of crazy, right? So I wasn't doing any clinical work at all for about a year and a half. I was back in school, which was insane. I'm in my mid-30s or whatever. It's kind of ridiculous. With kids that were like 21. Anyway, and then I was in the lab 60 some odd hours a week, running Western blots and doing echoes on mice and all kinds of crazy things. But it was worth it. But it was during that transition phase to get to the next step. So that's how I actually, and I got my MPH. I still use it intermittently. I work a lot with residents and medical students and fellows who have more clinical interests and don't have time to do basic science. So I'm able to work with them on clinical projects, survival analyses, and population-based projects from that experience. It's kind of like my side gig, so to speak. I mean, that's not what pays the bills.
We all need one of those.
That doesn't pay. What pays the bills are the basic science stuff. But I like being involved in clinical research still to this day. So I try to maintain some skills in that space.
Awesome. Hey, I hope my journey is like that. Low, but to get there, right? Okay. So what about cardiology made you interested in the field? I think everybody is motivated to do different things. I'm kind of sort of all over the place, but you said you were in affiliate at Temple and you chose cardiology, but you never told us why.
Sure. So actually, Temple cemented my passion for heart failure and transplantation, which is my subspecialty in cardiology. Actually, before I even started medical school, I had already made the decision I was going to pursue cardiology, and actually worked. I was one of those 1%ers who actually says, "Hey, I'm going to do this," and they do it. Before they even start med school, and they're exposed to other stuff. So I'm kind of insane, right? But I actually did it. So, and part of that drive came from my grandfather passed away from his second massive heart attack when I was 8. And it was pretty devastating. I didn't really understand what cardiovascular disease meant. I didn't find out later that he actually had a pacemaker from his first heart attack. And then just seeing that and knowing that I had uncles with high blood pressure, father with high blood pressure, et cetera, I knew the impact that cardiovascular disease had on my own family. So that really pushed me towards cardiology. And then in medical school, it just was really cemented when in physiology and pathophys, just learning about the heart. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I kind of knew, I thought about it, but that cemented it. And then at Temple, they had a really big heart failure transplant program, and that was a 4th year, and I was able to rotate on that service and really see the crazy life-saving things they were able to do with medications and devices and transplantation. So I knew cardiology, but then it was Temple is when I made the decision that I want to pursue heart failure transplant cardiology. And here I am today as a heart failure transplant cardiologist. So.
Awesome. Dr. Smith, in that first segment of our interview, you highlighted that you took a very different journey to becoming a physician scientist. Right? It's not the path that is programmed or kind of sort of, televised to us. And you told us a lot about that journey and kind of sort of why you chose that path. And you seem like a very good, reflector. And I just want to know, what were some of the challenges you experienced as a Black man in medicine and science? And let's start there.
Well, I think challenges with respect to being a Black male in medicine and as well as in science in general is that there aren't a lot of us, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have an overabundance of role models. Mm-hmm. But thankfully, even though you may not have those individuals who have that expertise in medicine and or science, you can always find a mentor somewhere outside of your space. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was, I harken back to Dr. Capers. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a physician scientist, but he knew who I should talk to, and he knew how to make sure that I was getting the appropriate resources and support. And then you also have to be willing to, sometimes there are people who don't look like you who can be mentors, right? I mean, you have to be open-minded, so to speak. Peter Moeller has been a great mentor. Bill Abraham, who was our former chair of our chief of cardiology, is a great mentor, supported me throughout. So I think you just have to be open-minded and have a slate of different mentors. Mm-hmm. Who different individuals have different strengths that can work with you in different spaces. Mm-hmm. So that's what worked for me to kind of overcome these challenges, because I couldn't go and find a basic scientist, heart failure transplantation, physician scientist that look like me. Nope. They don't exist.
We're going to change that.
So you just had to, so I had some who, so I had to just figure out who could help in different spaces. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like I mentioned, these mentors may not look like you. You develop that rapport and that trust, and that's, and you just have to be willing to just kind of step outside your comfort zone sometimes. Mm-hmm. So that's the challenge, right? It's just being, and then you just have to have confidence in yourself, knowing that you're going to have challenges. You're going to have people who doubt you, people who think you can't do it, or some people think maybe you're getting special preferences, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And you just have to let that roll off, right? You just have to believe that you deserve to be at the table with everyone else. Right. You deserve to be in that selection committee with everyone else. Mm-hmm. You deserve to be competitive for that grant, or like everyone else. And you just have to have that mindset and not let the toxicity of negativity just inundate you. You have to let it go. There will always be people who will doubt you and don't think you deserve it, don't think you can make it. And, okay, so what? But on the other hand, you have your mentors and other people who believe in you, and that's what you focus on, and just believe in yourself. There will always be challenges, and then there's challenges when you step outside of the confines of this university, right? Mm-hmm. When I take off this white coat and jump in my car, I'm just like any other black male that you see on the streets. So I mean, that's a constant, situation reminder of the realities that you face in the world. And so you just learn how to deal with it, so to speak, confidently, professionally. And that's how I approach life and deal with all this. So just staying positive and not to allow myself to sink to those levels. Negative energy distracts you and will get you off track. And you can't be at your most productive self if you allow that to creep into your mind.
Agreed. Hey, you guys are listening. He's sharing gems. That's awesome. So, to that same vein of you sharing your experience, you gave a talk in August 2019 about a new and existing research field that you and your colleagues kind of sort of pioneered here at the Ohio State College of Medicine called cardio-oncology. Can you explain to me what that field is to our audience? What was kind of sort of the genesis of that, and whatever struggles and triumphs that you guys had in that process?
Sure. So a lot of my research initially was based around cytoskeletal protein spectrums in heart failure and electrophysiology, understanding how these different proteins work to interact with other molecular structures and how we can take these proteins and their breakdown products and translate them to diagnostic assays in humans and using transgenic animal models and whatever. So that's a lot of what I spent time doing, learning from Peter Moeller and learning and working on in our lab. But I've always had a foot on the clinical side. As I mentioned, I'm a heart failure transplant cardiologist, so so my clinic is just purely individuals with heart failure. And what we started to see that over time, we were seeing more and more patients who had heart failure who previously had been exposed to some chemotherapeutic agent. So they survived their cancer because the therapies are becoming so great and efficacious, but unfortunately they started to have secondary heart problems. And now the number one cause of death for cancer survivors is actually cardiovascular disease. Okay, so essentially, because of the rise of cardiovascular disease and cancer survivors, there became an imminent need to understand why and how. So obviously, there was a lot of work on the clinical side to understand how these different chemotherapeutic agents are impacting patients and how we can protect them. But me, having a basic translational training, I want to understand the mechanisms. So our lab started to switch and transition from more spectrum-based research, which we still do, but wanted to understand the mechanisms in terms of how some of these drugs lead to cardiotoxicity, what are the pathways that lead to heart failure and arrhythmias with some of these agents, so then we can develop cardioprotective strategies to prevent those side effects and keep people on their chemotherapeutic agent and prevent heart failure and arrhythmias. So that's where my interest stemmed from. So essentially, we had clinicians more on the clinical side cardiologists and oncologists who wanted to try to solve this, and you had people who were on the basic side. So essentially, we all got together and essentially formed a program. We actually have a true cardio-oncology program here. Dan Addison, who's a great friend of mine and colleague, is one of the co-chairs of that and founders of that program. To where we have a lot of scientists, physicians, and different individuals who have an interest in this space. So when I gave that talk, it was really just to introduce to an audience the concept of how these life-saving therapies can actually have side effects, and how can we prevent these cardiovascular side effects. And so that's what I was talking about. And it's really an explosion in terms of the amount of interest. Because, like I mentioned, people are living longer because these drugs are great. And we have to find a way to prevent the cardiovascular side effects, to keep people on their drugs safely.
Awesome. So it's probably you guys made me have to learn these new drugs during my step. And I couldn't even pronounce the words. So I was like, Deroxar, what? What do you... That's awesome. That's pretty exciting. And again, it shows the versatility of MD, PhD, or just in general physician scientists, that you can also create stuff outside of creating in a lab for your patients, but you can create a whole new field to address questions, that is from a different field, right, to your own.
Yeah, no, I think, I think that's one of the unique aspects of being a physician scientist, is that you, at least for me, it's always to make sure you have one foot in the clinical space so you can ask relevant questions, right? So you need to continue to see patients, be involved in patient care, so you can find out what's relevant, what do people need, what questions do I need to address, and then by also having that clinical background, how can I translate this stuff from the lab back to patients, right? I mean, you can study the inner workings of a mitochondrial membrane for 30 years and never understand all the different pathways of how it works. And if you can't take that and impact Mary Jane down the street, then I don't really care, right?
Agreed.
I don't care. So.
Agreed. I mean, we have basic scientists who would disagree with us, but
I know.
Right? There's, everybody has their own drive, right? And for me, I think, it's the people aspect that's being able to have these conversations and then, impact people and change lives. And I think as a physician scientist, you can do both, right? You can, solve immediate problems and then say, hey, something about, John Doe, Dick, and Harry was so similar. Why are they going through what they're going through? And let me go answer that question. That's so important and necessary. So it's awesome, that we have as physician scientists to do that. So in the same realm of developing and pioneering things here at the Ohio State College of Medicine, you also spoke about developing new platforms to detect early signs of heart failure and damage. What kind of sort of promising areas is your lab studying? Can you give us a little bit?
Sure. So, what I first was involved in terms of basic science was looking at beta-2 spectrum. So beta-2 spectrum is a cytoskeletal protein, and essentially these are proteins that serve as scaffolds for cardiomyocytes, right? So they maintain the integrity and structure of the cell and cell membrane. But they're more than just these kind of passive scaffolds. They actually are more dynamic in terms of signaling, trafficking, and other inner workings within the cardiomyocyte. Importantly, our lab has discovered that under different conditions, stress conditions, these proteins can be cleaved by different enzymes. I won't get into all that fancy terminology, but essentially under stress, we'll just say stress, these proteins can be cleaved and actually can be secreted from the cell, either directly from injury or packaged via different mechanisms into the bloodstream. And we've developed platforms in a way to actually detect different fragments of these proteins in the bloodstream. So we're now using that information technology to try to come up with an early ELISA, essentially a diagnostic assay to detect early signs of cardiovascular damage. I mean, there are existing platforms and markers out there. We believe that what we focus on is actually more upstream and can be detected prior to some of the standard commercial enzymes that are currently available. And then importantly, what we're working on directly coincides with our interest in cardio-oncology. We believe that most of these chemotherapeutic agents can actually directly impact the cardiomyocyte and lead to the cleavage and secretion of these proteins. So we actually want to be the first group to develop a diagnostic assay that's never been developed before to actually detect heart damage from chemotherapeutic agents and have a true way to establish surveillance and have a way to diagnose patients. So if we can capture early signs of cardiovascular damage by using a highly sensitive and a specific assay, then we can either modulate their therapy, just stop it altogether, put them on other cardioprotective agents, and prevent the onset of heart failure or things of that nature that would obviously lead to worse outcomes.
Awesome. That's pretty exciting. So let me just go on my little nerdy track. So you're saying that current standards, and maybe some of our audience will know, we look at CKMD and troponin, but those happen after the cell membrane is ruptured. So you're saying that way before that, when you were first kind of sort of experiencing whatever stress condition, whether it's drugs or norepinephrine toxicity or something like that, you can see, oh, this one protein or something was cleaved and sent out. So you're like, oh, we know it happened, but there's no cell damage. Correct. So that's awesome. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
We'll keep track and we'll make sure we'll let everyone know when you discover this, because I'm sure you will.
Yeah, we have a patent on a product coming, so hopefully we can get this to market sometime soon.
Awesome. Hey, you heard it here first.
Got to be a businessman too, right? So
that's awesome. That's amazing. So with all those exciting things going on, right, in the next 5 or 10 years, what really excites you for your field or whatever field you're going to create or something like that?
That's a really good question. And I try to break things down into 3-year buckets, 3 to 4-year buckets, and then kind of reevaluate in the sense of where am I and where do I want to go. So I would say in the next 5 years, I would like to be at a position where we've been able to successfully commercially develop our diagnostic assay and be in the early phases of testing it in humans and some pilot observational studies, things of that nature, to actually validate that. I would like to continue to build up our basic science and translational program to revolve around cardio-oncology space. There are now new major NIH funding opportunities revolving around this, so I want to become involved in that area. And then I want to take the next 3 years or so, 3 to 5 years, and see what impact I can make within the Department of Internal Medicine, as well as the Heart and Vascular Center with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion, having these leadership roles. So I have a lot on my plate, so I like to see what transpires. And then I think for me, success will be having made a change in our department, making positive initiatives and changes in our department within the Heart and Vascular Center, having some success in the lab with more grants, having my current grad students get their PhDs. If all that happens over the next 5 years, then I think I'll be well positioned to, if I want to pivot to a new leadership role or just continue to do what I'm doing, we shall see. I mean, 5 years from now, my daughter will be almost 6, so that'd be kind of cool.
Awesome.
Kind of hard to think about, but so it's a lot. We'll see.
Awesome, and we're gonna get to talking about your daughter in a bit, but I have one last question to kind of sort of top off that, awesome research trajectory that you're on, and you were named the Distinguished Researcher of the Year, and we've mentioned so many awesome accolades for this man already, so we know he's awesome. And so you were named a Distinguished Researcher of the Year by the Landecker Honor Society for your mentoring of future physicians. Tell us a little bit about your approach for mentoring and cultivating future MDs and MD PhDs.
Thanks, and it was really, I think to this date, one of the greatest, highest honors I've ever received. So I was really flattered when I received that award, because I do this out of just a passion for trainees. For me, you have to be available and you have to be honest. I think are the attributes that anyone who works with me, they know that I'm going to be honest with them, and I'm going to make sure that I'm available. So if they have issues or questions, I'll make time for them. I meet with my mentees on a regular basis, my grad students on a regular basis, to make sure they're doing okay. And also, we try to have fun outside of the lab. It's a little harder now in COVID, but we would have get-togethers and kind of things just to kind of build collegiality within the environment. But I think it's just being supportive and believing in them. And really, for me, it was just learning, seeing different mentors that I have and trying to learn attributes from them, learning what made Dr. Caper successful, what attributes and traits did I glean from him, can I make sure that I learn from and make sure I'm there for my mentees. I think it's just being genuine, being a passion, being available. For me, that's the key. If you're available and you believe in your mentees, and I think they see you're authentic, then I think that's what develops that relationship.
I agree. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. And yeah, that's just so important. I think authenticity and belief in people, because I think at our levels of our careers, it's really hard to believe in ourselves, and because we think we haven't accomplished anything yet. But I think that's super important. So I'm glad that you shared that with us. So how do you kind of sort of balance your research abilities, your medical abilities and then your family and stuff. Like, what is your research like traditional? Is it 75%, 25%? What do you kind of do there?
It varies week by week, but if you look on paper, it's supposed to be 75% research, 25% clinical. Mm-hmm. It just varies based on the week. It's crazy but for me, I try to compartmentalize what I do. Mm-hmm. So when I'm at work, I'm at work, and when I'm at home, I'm at home. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the key. I get started early. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm usually working by 5 o'clock in the morning, but that's because when I need to be finished by 4 to 5 p.m. so I can spend some time with my daughter and my family before I have to put her to sleep. Mm-hmm. So, you know, my 12 hours are shifted in terms of how I do it and what I do. And then I make sure to allocate certain time for meetings away from time for research. And it's really being strategic about how you set your schedule up. So my whole week is really strategically set up to make sure that I know that each day there's different things that I need to do to stay on top of all of my responsibilities. So I have a set day for clinic in the morning, and then set day for meetings. And if meetings don't fall in my meeting slots, then it's not going to happen, because I can't steal from something else, right? Because then, you know, it just becomes chaos. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is that when you do go home, that you're actually there mentally at home with your family. So I just try to cram as much as I can from that 5 to 5 kind of window. That's my time. And then when it's over, you turn it off. Turn it off. Sometimes I do work on the weekends, but you get up early while everyone else is asleep, and you do what you got to do. And once they start waking up, turn it off. So it's just a lot of planning and discipline. It's not easy, but you know, I'm probably sleep deprived, but that's okay.
We all are. I definitely am going to be catching up on sleep for the next 2 months for all the 12-hour days that I had, which is great. So, you know, again, like you mentioned, it's difficult and it's been a long journey. What about this kept you motivated this whole time to do the research, to do the science, to take off from the medicine, to do the research, to do the science?
Well, I think it's critically important that not only you have to obviously believe in yourself, but then it's helpful when you have a great support system. So my wife has been with me since I was a second-year cardiology resident, so she's seen this whole journey, and she's been supported the whole way. So having someone in your corner like that who believes in you, who says you can do it, and never says, hey, you should stop doing this and do that, I mean, that's critically important. You have to have that kind of support at home. And then having the support of your mentors and of your parents and things of that nature, that really keeps you grounded, keeps you focused, maintains that belief, energy, and enthusiasm that you can accomplish whatever you need to accomplish. But at the end of the day, if you have a partner who's in your corner who is excited, sometimes more excited about my success than I am. I mean, honestly, I think she gets more psyched up about some of my accomplishments than I do. I mean, that's critically important. You got to find that person, right?
That's awesome. So before we're going to wrap up right now on the research aspect, and before we do that, I want to make sure our audience kind of sort of understands cardiology is a pretty rigorous field, and you had a lot of good mentors along the way, and you have all these awards and accolades, and I wanted to you to give our audience kind of sort of one big instrumental thing that you felt grounded you in that process that made it easier or better, or when things got harder, better. What is that one thing that was indispensable to everything that you've done and has accomplished right now?
I think the thing that has always motivated me was that fear of failure, and not wanting. I mean, for me, I could accept if I didn't do well in something, if I didn't get a good grade, or if I didn't get a grant, or whatever it was, or whatever it may be. I could accept it as long as I was honest with myself and I knew that I put my my best effort forward. But for me, it's about putting forth my best effort and having that fear of failure. Like, I'm not going to fail. I'll keep at it, and no matter how long it takes, and not giving up. And I think some of that dates back to just my athletic background and coming up and dealing with a lot of that stuff in athletics, and having that drive and that fear of not wanting to fail and not wanting to give up, and just that internal desire, that passion just to succeed, keep pushing. That kind of underdog mentality. I was fast. I wasn't the biggest guy. I was fast. I wasn't the biggest. I wasn't the strongest, but I always had that drive. And I think for me, it's just that's what's always kept me going, even when you have your bad days. I mean, obviously you have your support system, your family, critically important. Having your family and your faith obviously keep you going, and that's critically important and huge. But you also have to find a way internally to muster that energy, that drive, to motivate yourself. Because if you don't have that, then it doesn't matter what your faith or family is, you're not going to accomplish it. You have to still, at the end of the day, believe in yourself too.
Awesome. So Dr. Smith, in this next segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about your personal life, get an understanding of how you balance that, how integral they've been in this journey. You've already mentioned that having your wife as a support system since your second year as a fellow has been really instrumental, and she's really excited for all your great success. And you also kind of sort of touched a little bit on when you're at work, you're at work. When you're at home, you're at home. Tell us a little bit more about that dynamic. The support you get from your wife, and having a little one at home.
Yeah. Well, I think it's helpful that my wife, she has a medical background. She's a nurse, and now she's a nurse practitioner, and is developing her own. She has her own career and practice and business and things of that nature. So I think just her having an understanding of what's involved on the medical side was critically important. So even going back to when I was a resident, when we were in the dating phase, I mean, she at that time was still a nurse. And she had a good understanding of what's involved and what she was getting herself into in terms of the long hours, being on call, fellowships, and residencies, and all this and that and whatever. But she was willing to hang in there, because she was just always supportive, and she wasn't interested in always cardiologists, blah blah blah. It was more the person, right? So that was the key. And then we made an agreement somewhere along the way that we got to keep work and home separate. I was guilty, like most people, at one point where I would come home, spend some time, and then I'd be back on the computer or on the internet or trying to do something at work, trying to do something at home, wrapping up stuff. And, I realized that too much of that stuff was seeping into the home life, and we just both made a commitment to each other. Like, we can't do that. That's not productive for having a family or just sanity. You got to escape at some point. So that was critically important. Then the biggest unknown for us was, okay, now we're ready to have a family. How is that going to impact things? It's been the best thing ever, having a daughter, but it's definitely, you have a lot of sleepless nights, and it's another way of time management. I mean, I thought I was pretty good with time management before. I'm even better now, because I refuse to go home and then do work. Is go home and see your family, spend time with your daughter, and whatnot. So it's just forced me to really, really, really be focused with what I do at work, and not to waste a minute of my time at work, to be as efficient as possible, so I can get done what I need to get done, because I can't do it when I go home. That's my family, and we have that great understanding about that, and so that's the beautiful thing.
It's awesome. It's always good to have someone who understands the process, who knows, hey, you're gonna stay up until however many hours studying for a test, or 2 months, and not be able to see anyone. So what about outside of your immediate family? You mentioned you had family in Cincinnati. How often do you see them?
Well, every Thanksgiving up until this last Thanksgiving, I see them often, not as often as I would like, just because of work and things like that. But I have a lot of family in Cincinnati, big family in St. Louis. Haven't had a chance to see them recently. a lot of friends from college scattered throughout the states. Hopefully soon, when things calm down, I'll be able to reconnect with some of my college friends. We would do annual cabin trips for the past 6-7 years with a lot of my college friends, and this year we haven't, for obvious reasons, it's been postponed, and looking forward to resuming that again. I have my basketball family, different guys that I played with throughout the city, whether it's here or other rec leagues throughout the city, and we have the different group chats. We stay in touch that way, and hopefully soon we'll get back on the court and get back to that. Then I have a lot of friends from residency. We would get together once a year, and we obviously, again, skipped this year, but we'll reconnect. So I have a lot of important people outside of my immediate family that I look to and reach out to keep me grounded, remind me of who I am and the journeys and struggles of how I got here, and just to get away and I think the nice thing is when you're around those individuals, whether it's you're playing basketball or you're with your other family and friends, like you're not thinking about science, you're not thinking about being a cardiologist or, can this patient get a VAD or a transplant? You're just you, right? Yeah. So I like that balance. I need that balance.
Awesome. And so you spoke about basketball. What else do you do besides basketball? Are you you're a one sport kind of guy?
I like football. I mean,
okay.
I was pretty good actually. Actually, I was better in football than basketball growing up. In high school, got some all-state stuff, but never pursued it for college because I got scholarships at some crummy colleges, and I was more focused on my academics, and I knew I wasn't going to the NFL, so I gave that up pretty quickly. So I watched football. Baseball occasionally. I'm from St. Louis, so the St. Louis Cardinals is a big thing. If you're from St. Louis, you're going to be a baseball fan.
Yeah.
So I'll follow a little baseball. I pay attention to hockey sometimes. I mean, our hockey team won the Stanley Cup a few years ago, so that was pretty cool. Up until then, I really don't pay that much attention to that.
What is your favorite quote that you try to live by?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have a favorite quote per se, but as I mentioned, the fear of failure. That's what drives me. That's what motivates me and makes me get up. Push harder on that grant. Keep working on that experiment. That's what kind of keeps me going on a day-to-day basis. I don't know. There's a lot of. You'll see a different quoter saying, and that kind of resonates with you. But hard for me to point out like that's my favorite. I don't know.
All right. And so, as we kind of sort of wrap up, one of the reasons why AABPS is doing these interviews is because we want to cultivate kind of sort of a repository of physician scientist experiences that can give our audience a pretty diverse vision of what a journey to becoming a physician scientist may look like, in that it's possible, especially if you are from underrepresented group or if you're a Black minority. So to our audience, and our up-and-coming Black physician scientists, like, what do you have to say to them on their journey, or, should they pursue it? What should they expect? Why they shouldn't give up, et cetera? What would you say?
So I think that being a physician scientist, or especially a Black physician scientist, puts you in a unique club. For one, there aren't a lot of us, so we need to support each other, and we need more. And the only way to get more is to continue to encourage people to pursue that pathway. It's not going to happen just organically, right? You have to push people, kind of nurture them, mentor them to see this as a sustainable career pathway. You have to be receptive to different pathways. Some may pursue the traditional MD, PhD. Some may be like me and be a late bloomer and figure it out later. But it's all about mentorship, and you have to have that. You can't lose people along the way. There are a lot of people who pursue MD, PhD, and then they decide later, I hate science, or I hate this, and then they pivot and go in different directions. We need to keep these individuals within the small circle so we can grow that. So that requires mentorship, letting people know that it's okay to have struggles, it's okay to have this and that, and as you build that network, then you can reach out to different people to help individuals based on their particular struggles. And those who have similar backgrounds, so to speak. I think at the end of the day, being a physician scientist is an awesome career, because you get to have flexibility in your career and your life. I enjoy the diversity of my job. Okay, I mean, every day is something different. On Monday, I may see heart failure patients in Gahanna for clinic. Mm-hmm. Tuesday, I may have meetings with deans and vice deans about some diversity initiatives. Wednesday, I'm in my lab with lab meetings and running new experiments, mm-hmm. things of that nature. Thursday, I may be meeting with cardiology fellows to discuss some of their research projects or things of that nature. Friday, I'm working, so it's just different. It's not the same thing. And I think that's the beauty of what we do, is that it opens the door for so many different pathways in terms of what you can pursue leadership. Like, I never envisioned doing this or being vice chair of anything or whatever. But by being receptive and open-minded, opportunities will come to you, present themselves to you. You just have to be ready for when said opportunity presents itself. I think that's the key. So I would say to those who are on the fence about pursuing this career pathway or doubt this career pathway, to stick with this career pathway. It's not easy. Nothing worth having is easy, though. That's the reality of life. If it's easy, everyone will be doing it.
True.
I mean, that's. I guess you want a quote. That's my quote.
That is your quote. There you go. That's true.
If it were that easy, everyone would be doing it. It's not easy, but it can be done. It's doable. It just takes some work, some planning, some strategy, and this is a good start. Having this network of like-minded physicians and physician scientists to build up this network. It's critically important, and to see that you can do all this science and be a physician, still have a family, still play some ball, and still be relatively normal.
Indeed, school them in the ball too. Exactly.
I think I'm normal for the most part, and I'm still a physician scientist. You can do it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Sakima Smith, for sharing your time, all those great gems, and sharing your journey. I'm sure that our audience will, take away from it what we should. So everybody out there, get yourself a big dog like Dr. Capers, and other big dogs as well, not one, but like many, to help you through your journey. Thank you so much.
Shane. Appreciate it, Shane. Thank you.
Thank you.
So AABPS has created an environment that is inclusive, nurturing, and most importantly, fosters collegiality and mentorship. And really, it's a space for Black physician scientists. We don't really have anything like it. It's unique, and I think that the best is yet to come. So most importantly, at the end of the day, if you are a physician scientist and you are in this space and you're a Black or African American you're looking for a home of other like-minded individuals, then you should absolutely join AABPS.